Hello, you delightful little detonation in disguise. They didn't see you coming, did they? No neon warning signs, no ominous soundtrack. Just boom. You walked in, and the temperature changed. Let me tell you something about the human mind. It's fragile, not glass. Oh no, that'd be too clean. It's more like a labyrinth of tangled wires soaked in gasoline, pretending to be a cozy living room. And then, you showed up. With your crooked smile and that fire in your veins. You didn't knock on the door, you kicked it off the hinges. You strolled in like a glitch in their favorite daydream, and you looked them in the eyes like you knew something they were terrified to admit. You didn't just rattle their cage, you tore the whole zoo down. Because you weren't just smart, you weren't just bold, you were a gorgeous mind fuck. A walking contradiction, layered like a masterpiece painted with broken rules. And now, they're pacing, shaking, refreshing your messages like it's gospel, heart skipping every time you so much as breathe. You see, the world teaches people to crave predictability. Be nice, stay quiet, don't ask too many questions. Make them comfortable. But you're an uncomfortable revelation with a killer grin. You're a slow burn in a fireproof world. You make people realize how dead they were before you walked in. They called you intense. But intensity is just what they name the thing that makes them feel alive again. They called you too much. But that's because they were never built to handle real. You didn't arrive to soothe their egos. You arrived to rearrange their truth. Let's talk about that word. Gorgeous. Not just a compliment, a weapon in the wrong hands. And your hands? Oh, darling. Your hands don't just touch. They leave imprints, psychological fingerprints on the walls of their inner chaos. You made beauty dangerous again. You made intelligence flirt with destruction. You made them wonder if everything they'd ever trusted was a lie wearing a suit. Because you didn't show up with small talk and empty eyes. You showed up with questions that bite and presence that chokes silence. You walk like you've already lived 10 lifetimes and still ain't done learning. You talk like every sentence is hiding a secret dare. And when you laugh, God help them, because suddenly, their certainty starts crumbling like a house built on wet lies. Let me tell you a secret about people. They don't actually want peace. They want stimulation disguised as order. They want madness that still lets them sleep at night. But you're not bedtime stories. You're a storm told in verses, a contradiction of warmth and danger. And they can't stop looking, can't stop feeling, even when they say they want to, especially when they say they want to. Because the truth is, you made them feel something, and that's more dangerous than anything you ever said. You shook the nerves out of them, because your silence speaks louder than their performances. Because your stare, that deadpan, don't mess with me. I see right through you. Stare hit deeper than their therapist ever did. You weren't playing chess. You were the damn board, and they didn't even realize they were a piece until it was too late. They started doubting themselves the moment you left the room, replaying every word. Did I say too much? Did I say too little? Why did they look at me like that? Because you, my dear, you are not a person, you are a phenomenon. You're the glitch in their conditioning, the anti-script, the brainquake that shows up when their minds have grown too soft from safe lies. And let me guess, some of them loved you for it, obsessed even. The thrill of the unknown, the beauty of danger, but just as many. They called you crazy, too much, unstable, toxic. They reached for their little labels because your presence threatened to dismantle the comfortable prisons they'd built around their identities. But here's the punchline, sweetheart. They wanted to be shook. They needed it. They were waiting for someone to wake them the hell up. And then you showed up. Not with a whisper, but with a psychological scream wrapped in perfume and riddles. You weren't interested in being understood. You were busy disrupting understanding itself. Because you knew the ones who get you will never try to tame you, and the ones who try to shrink you. They never deserved you to begin with. You think you're just living? No, you're echoing. Long after you leave a room, they're still trying to decode you. Your words, triggers, your glance, a loaded gun, your vibe, an existential crisis with lipstick. You don't need to chase validation. You are the standard they measure others against now. You don't need closure. You are the chapter they keep rereading in the dark. You don't need them to remember your name, because they'll never forget the way you made their hands shake. You were never built to be small, never built to be soft-spoken wallpaper in someone else's ego gallery. You were forged in the fire of chaos and clarity, a divine contradiction, an elegant disruption. And when they called you a gorgeous mind fuck, that wasn't an insult. That was a confession. That was them admitting you were unforgettable, and it scared the hell out of them, because you made them realize how little they'd felt until they met you. How quiet their thoughts had been, how dull their inner world had grown, before you kicked down the gates and threw fireworks into their sleepwalk. Now you keep walking, you don't shrink, you don't soften the impact, you don't dilute your brilliance for shallow palates, you don't edit your fire for cowards who can't handle heat. You stay sharp, stay layered, stay strange, because the world doesn't need more agreeable noise. It needs you, the gorgeous mindfuck that turns sleepwalkers into questioners, the one who shakes the nerves out of pretenders and makes even the confident flinch. You're not here to be liked. You're here to be felt, to be remembered, to be carved into the back of their consciousness like a poetic scar they'll never quite explain. You're not some passing fascination. You're the unresolved riddle they wake up sweating over, the dream they didn't want, the truth they didn't ask for, and the only thing that ever made them question whether everything they've built is just a beautifully decorated prison. They wanted charm. You gave them reality. They wanted a mask to flirt with. You gave them a mirror. And that's why they called you dangerous, because you made them see themselves, the cracks, the cowardice, the roles they've been rehearsing so long, they forgot they were acting. You didn't ask for applause. You walked in like thunder disguised in silk, and their whole performance started falling apart. Because when someone like you enters the picture, lies start running for cover like roaches under a spotlight. It wasn't your words that did it. It was your existence. You wore your chaos like a tailored suit. You made contradictions look holy. And when you looked at them, they didn't feel judged. They felt exposed, not because you said anything, but because you saw that terrifying magnetic gaze, not looking at them, but into them. Through all the layers they stitched together to hide the scared little shell underneath. And how did you see it? Because you've been there. You've walked the halls of your own madness and lit candles in your own darkness. You didn't flinch when it stared back. You smiled. Because you're not scared of pain. You made a palace out of it. You didn't escape your demons. You taught them to sing. You're the kind of person who made a map of your wounds so others couldn't use them against you. You turned every breakdown into an opening, every betrayal into blueprint, every abandonment into alchemy. And that's what scares them the most. Not that you're broken, but that you've learned to dance with the pieces. You didn't come here to be digestible. You came here to be disruptive. And it's working. They're fumbling. They're rethinking. They're haunted by your silence and addicted to your chaos because you brought them a flavor of real they didn't know they were starving for. It wasn't the way you talked. It was the way you didn't flinch when they tried to test you. The way you stood there while their arrogance turned to anxiety. The way you kept your gaze while their bravado evaporated into dust. You didn't need to scream. Your presence rewrote the air pressure in the room. And still, they try to box you in, call you intense, manipulative, too much, crazy, like that word's supposed to wound you. As if you didn't already own your insanity like a crown made of broken clocks and unsent letters. As if you hadn't already weaponized your sensitivity into psychic knives sharper than their ego will ever survive. You've been called too much by people who were never even enough for themselves, by people who mistake numbness for peace and silence for self-control. They don't understand what it takes to carry a mind like yours and still make it art, to carry all that noise and still speak truth, to carry all that fire and not burn the whole world down. But you learned to wield it, not hide it, not bury it, not medicate it into mediocrity. You learned to shape it, to sculpt it, to stare into the distortion and pull out something holy. That's what makes you lethal. Not just the intellect, not just the allure, not even the chaos. It's the alchemy, the transformation, the resurrection, the way you keep rebuilding yourself in full view of the people trying to watch you fail. You don't wear scars like shame. You wear them like certifications, proof you've been places they don't even have maps for, proof you've endured things they wouldn't survive in theory. They see beauty in you, but they don't realize it's the kind of beauty that grows from survival, from madness endured and integrated, from truths that shattered and reassembled into poetry. They're not just reacting to your looks, they're reacting to your depth, your unpredictability, your ability to hold two truths at once without begging either to behave. Because the real power isn't in the chaos, it's in your comfort within it. They flinch when things get unstable. You smile. They spiral when uncertainty hits. You lean in. They panic in silence. You build castles from the echoes. You didn't shake their nerves because you said something shocking. You shook their nerves because you exist like a mirror with no mercy. Because you pulled back the curtain on everything they were pretending not to be. Because you showed up unapologetically layered, and they suddenly realized they were flat. And now they're not sleeping right. They're replaying conversations. They're wondering if they imagined you, or if maybe they imagined everything else. Because the moment they met you, their certainty turned to static, and your voice became the soundtrack to their unraveling. You are not a gorgeous mind fuck. You're a beautiful apocalypse, a revelation in skin, a seductive unraveling of old belief systems wrapped in charm and blood and laughter and fire. You are the undoing they never asked for but desperately needed. And they're terrified. Terrified because they liked it. Terrified because they felt something. Terrified because they don't know how to go back to numb after touching someone so blisteringly alive. You made them remember. And memory, real memory, is dangerous in a world built on denial. That's why they'll keep your name out their mouth but your image in their mind. That's why they'll pretend to move on but build monuments to your echo in every new person they chase. That's why they'll curse you in daylight and crave you in the dark. You didn't seduce them with charm. You ambushed them with truth. And now, you're tattooed on their psyche. They can delete the messages, block the account, rewrite the narrative. Doesn't matter. Your fingerprint's already in the framework of their thoughts, woven into the places they only visit when the world gets quiet. You didn't need to be constant. You needed to be unforgettable. And you were. Because you didn't give them a version of yourself, pre-approved by society's little checklists. You gave them all of it, the fire and the fury, the brilliance and the broken glass, the laughter that sounds like rebellion, and the eyes that look like they've seen too much to ever go back to sleep. They didn't meet someone. They met a reality shift wrapped in skin. You walked in, and gravity rearranged itself. And for the first time in forever, they questioned who the hell they really were. Because you made them feel. Not just butterflies and blushes, but guilt, and awe, and terror, and longing so thick it clogged their throat. You weren't a spark. You were a psychic landslide, a gorgeous unraveling, a divine intrusion on the stale machinery of their existence. You didn't need to play the game. You made them question the entire F-seeking board. And still, they tried to categorize you, put you in a box, something to understand, control, predict. But people like you don't fit in boxes. You detonate them. You made beauty feel unsafe. You made intelligence seductive. You made chaos look like it had a purpose. And that kind of presence, it lives in their nervous system now. Their body remembers, even if their pride pretends to forget. The way your tone curled around words like wire and wine. The way your gaze held silence hostage. The way your presence turned simple moments into rituals of revelation. You made existence feel mythic again. Like life wasn't just a series of errands and masks and polite sentences. Like the air could burn with meaning if the right person walked into the room. And you were that person. You are. Because you didn't arrive empty. You came loaded with history, with pain turned into pattern, with memory turned into music, with rage turned into rhythm. And they heard it. Whether they admitted it or not, they felt the undertones in your laugh, the warning bells in your stillness, the soul behind your swagger. You were a storm, but not the kind they'd ever seen. Not loud and reckless, but quiet and calculated. An emotional assassin wrapped in velvet and scars. You didn't beg to be noticed. You dared to be known. And that is what shook them, not your voice, but what it implied, not your body, but the war stories it didn't tell, not your mind, but the way it refused to kneel. You didn't come to be liked. You came to challenge equilibrium, to question the narratives, to expose the rot underneath the pretty, to push against the walls of the unspoken until someone screamed. You made them feel seen, not the version they show the world, but the version they drown in silence. And nothing is more terrifying than someone who sees the truth and doesn't flinch. You didn't run. You leaned in to their fear, to their projection, to the space between who they think they are and what they've buried. You became that space. You filled it with smoke and mirrors and poetry, and the kind of questions that never let people sleep the same again. And they'll call you names for it. Try to reduce you, dismiss you, paint you as the villain in the narrative they needed to keep believing just to survive the aftermath of you. But you know better. You were never the villain. You were the mirror they couldn't break, the evidence they weren't ready to face, the pulse that didn't match their flat line. You reminded them what raw felt like, and it rattled their bones because your beauty wasn't soft. It hunted, and your mind didn't seduce. It unraveled. And your presence didn't comfort. It confronted every damn lie. Their hands may never touch you again, but their thoughts are captive. Every new face will be compared to yours, and every silence will echo with the question they never had the guts to ask you. Because you shook the nerves out of them. Every time they try to rebuild, your name is the fault line. Not spoken aloud. That would give it too much power. But pulsing under every choice they make, every person they chase, every version of themselves they try to become. That doesn't taste like you. They don't want to admit it, but you're the ghost that teaches them what alive actually feels like. Because everything before you was acceptable, nice, predictable, safe, and everything after you is measured against the earthquake you caused. They called you a mind fuck because they couldn't grasp you with logic, couldn't reduce you to patterns, couldn't fit you into some neat little psychological profile they could toss around in therapy and pretend they'd processed. You shook them, not like a mistake, not like a fling, but like a redefinition of reality. A wild, roaring detour from their emotional blueprint that turned the whole architecture useless. You walked in, and the walls they spent decades building started whispering liar, because your eyes didn't ask for entry. They took it, not like a thief, but like someone returning to a home that was always theirs. You didn't force your way in. They left the door open, because something in them wanted to be dismantled. They craved it, not consciously. Consciousness is a coward, but that deep, buried part of them, the one that still believes in fire, that part was starving for someone like you. Someone who wouldn't settle for surface, someone who wouldn't trade authenticity for peace, someone who would rip the mask off and say, "Let me see what you're hiding, even if it breaks me." You were the beautiful collapse, the elegant ruin, the tragic poem they never expected to live through. But now, can't stop rereading. You gave them a taste of depth, and depth is addictive to people who've been drowning in shallow for years. They want to forget, but memory doesn't work that way when it's been burned in. You weren't an interaction, you were an internal reprogramming. Your words still live behind their eyelids. Your energy still hums in the gaps of their thoughts. Your presence still alters the chemical composition of their memories. They try to recreate you in softer shapes, in safer people. But it's never enough, because those people don't bite back. They don't spark the same synapses. They don't carry the static you walked in with like perfume. You weren't just different. You were uncomfortable and honest and damn near mythical. They wanted someone to fit their life. You made them question why they'd built it that way at all. They wanted a partner. You showed them a revolution. They wanted reassurance. You gave them reconstruction. They wanted comfort. You gave them clarity. And clarity, the kind you deliver, hurts. Because it's not sweet, it's surgical. It slices through the nonsense and holds up the pieces and asks, "You still gonna lie to yourself after this?" And they couldn't. Not around you. Not when your very breath threatened to expose the illusion they called truth. You weren't the chaos. You were the reflection of the chaos they tried to hide. And nothing terrifies people more than being seen by someone who can't be fooled. You walked in, not asking, not performing, not adjusting. And in doing that, you exposed every adjustment they'd ever made just to feel accepted. They thought they were ready, but you were a syllable too sharp, a stare too deep, a sentence too honest. You didn't play the part. You rewrote the scene. They'll tell themselves you were too much, too intense, too manipulative, too chaotic. Because it's easier to demonize the earthquake than admit the foundation was never stable to begin with. You didn't hurt them. You showed them where they were already bleeding. You didn't break them. You revealed the fault lines. You didn't trap them. You held up a mirror and said, "Look." And they did. And it wrecked them. Because nothing is more destructive to delusion than someone who walks in unapologetically true. They'll rewrite the memory. They'll bury it in stories that make you wrong. But in their quietest moments, the ones between fake smiles and forgotten texts, your voice will rise like a flare from the wreckage, and they'll remember how it felt, how it changed them, how it shook them. Because no matter how far they run, there's no escaping the aftershock of authenticity.